Lies of P has just dropped their latest update, being the 1.3 version of the game, so I figured I'd make a quick little video just to update you guys on all of the key points that you need to know so you're well aware of what to expect when you next load up the game. And I guess just jumping straight into it, as soon as you do load up your game for the first time after downloading this update, you will be met with a nice happy screen telling you that you've got some freebies waiting to be collected. Those freebies are going to be some cosmetic items, including the full Aladoro outfit, so if you wanted to cosplay through the whole game being your favorite treasure hunter, you can now do that, as well as receiving the alchemist hat with the green glasses to essentially have a bit more variety in how your character looks, because beforehand you could either wear a mask and look like that particular person, or not wear a mask and just look like Pinocchio, and all that you could really change was your hair, whereas now you can put hats and glasses on your character to again mix and match the looks. But in reality, apart from that, update 1.3 is a huge overhaul in balancing all of the gameplay mechanics and enemies that we see in the game as well. The first major change that everybody's going to receive straight away is receiving the Rising Dodge upgrade, which was normally only obtained through the P organ. That was the skill that essentially allowed you to dodge out of the way when being hit to the ground after receiving a heavy attack, usually from either a mini boss or bosses, which is super useful and should have really been in the game from the get-go in my opinion, because if you didn't have that, your character would be on the floor for about 3 or 4 seconds, essentially then susceptible to another follow-up attack, whereas now you can dodge out the way, receive that heavy beating from the boss, but still have more than enough time to get out of the way for any future attacks. And then for those wondering, the replacement P organ is the Retain Guard Regain upon Pulse Cell use, and I know there's a bit of a mouthful, but it is extremely useful, because where previously when you use the Pulse Cell you lose all of the regain that you had, so like the grayed out health that you could get back with successive attacks, you will now keep that regain, so even though you use the Pulse Cell, you can then still follow up with 1 or 2 attacks, getting even more health back, again rewarding you for getting straight back into the action after using a Pulse Cell. But of course that's not all, as there is a whole host of other just gameplay and generic changes. Unfortunately, there are also a few notes in the list of patch notes that are a bit more generalized and don't go into specifics, much like with the difficulty changes to the general world in that subsection, where it just mentions that there's some increased damage to some weapons and increased staggering abilities again to some weapons. I did have a look and I couldn't see, statistically at least, any changes in the numbers in terms of the ARs for any of the weapons, so I don't know if the resistances have changed to certain enemies, but just having a quick look through the ARs of all the weapons, nothing really seems to change. Maybe it's the lower end weapons like the daggers, things like that have had the change. That would make more sense. So if you do have a weapon that has now all of a sudden become an absolute god beater, do let us know in the comments down below, because it'll be more than interesting to know if your main weapon is now all of a sudden 10 times better. But some weapons that we do know that have changed are in fact the Mjolnir exploding pickaxe and the acidic curve sword. This is because they all have different alignments that you can put on the weapon after using the Fable Art, so respectively they get electric blitz, overheat and decay, and normally once they have this effect after using the Fable Art, it takes an absolute age to then apply it to the enemies. That time has now been reduced, and typically where it was just better to use the grindstone, it's now actually viable to use these weapons to apply those elements. So if you wanted to mix these weapons into your build and use a different grindstone to increase your attack damage or parrying abilities, then again this is another benefit to mix and match the way that you play the game, making for all sorts of different alternatives and different builds to also be viable, and I guess help go against the meta of just running a heavy blade with the crap police baton, because that thing was just broken. And just on that, the weapon assembly has also had a nice balancing. They have balanced the movesets and the timing of all the movesets depending on the weapon combinations you make. So beforehand, the meta was to use, say, a short-handled weapon with a large blade to get the most damage output in the quickest time possible, because you're using a heavy blade that has a ridiculously high AR, but then also using a dagger's handle like the police bat with broken Fable Arts to do very quick attacks obviously dealing very high damage, making the game an absolute joke. Whereas now they have made it so if you're mixing, say, a heavy head on a short handle, they will both sort of negate each other and come to like a middle point in terms of the timings with the moveset. So the charged heavies have been increased in terms of the amount of time it takes to charge up and obviously release and hit the enemies. And then on the flip side, if you were using a combination that use, say, a light blade like the Salamander blade on a much larger handle like, say, Mjolnir's handle, again, rather than you still having the defect of having the longest lasting charged attacks, they have now been increased to function a lot quicker and use less stamina now, meaning that you can mix your favorite light weapon with the longest weapon in the game. It's obviously a lot more balanced and you're going to be quicker than what you were beforehand, so yeah, again, that just adds to the potential of all sorts of different builds and ways that you can obviously play the game. Also, just on that, the lighter blades have also had an increase in the amount of guard regain that you can receive. So when using just, say, the Salamander blade, you would get very small amounts of regain back. Now you're going to be getting a little bit more, so it can be a bit more viable essentially nowadays to use daggers and lighter weapons in the game, because now there's a bit more incentive to use them as they're a lot more balanced than what they were previously. And then the one last thing actually I forgot to mention is you do get a couple more quartz now from the Hotel Crack Shop. They will just have 2 extra quartz off the bat already, but then as you progress through the game and get supply boxes for that particular shop, there's 3 in total. After getting your first one, you will then have 1 additional quartz that you can buy, and then after the 3rd one, so fully completing the shop and unlocking everything, you will then have again an additional 2 quartz that you can get. So 5 extra quartz in total are going to be able to be purchased from Polendina, allowing you to obviously access your P organs a lot quicker and have access to even more sweet attributes early on in your game. But yeah, other than that, like I said earlier, the rest of the list are somewhat significant updates, but aren't really presented in the best way, at least from a terminology point of view, because most of them are just generic things like adjusted the attack speed of some monsters to make their attacks more intuitive. Guessing they mean they make them slower and more free-flowing, because that's under the decreased field difficulty sort of subsection. And then again, they've increased the duration of stance breaks for, again, some monsters. So do they mean mini bosses? Do they mean like literally like 1 or 2 types of enemies? And then again, like I mentioned at the very beginning, just generic terms like increased damage to some weapons and increased stance power to some weapons. So I can't really delve too much into that, but the only real things that you can obviously take note of are the general balancing in the weapons in terms of their movesets and how quick the power stancing moves are now. Obviously the frequency of the status alignments being then affected on the enemies with those 3 weapons that we mentioned, and just the all-round ease of life in terms of early upgrades with the quartz and the rising dodge being granted to you straight away. It all is quite significant still and is a brilliant update, especially as we're probably going to be getting some DLC next year. So it's all looking very good and positive for the future of Lies of P. But essentially that is everything that I felt like I needed to make you aware of if you are still playing Lies of P. Hopefully this has been informative and you've enjoyed this video. If you have, definitely make sure you leave a like rating down below. Let me know in the comments as well if you are still playing Lies of P or if you're eagerly awaiting some DLC to come out. But until then, obviously make sure that you're sticking around the channel for more content just like this. We also do a whole bunch of Elden Ring content, so if that sounds like your sort of thing, make sure that you're subscribed and stay up to date to all the latest videos that release here. Like I say, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you're having an amazing day. Go have fun with these new updates with Lies of P, and I guess I'll catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye.